Tillman Cove is in the heart of Binghamton, and Binghamton is one of the areas in the city where values are increasing. You're seeing a more diverse range of people moving into the neighborhood, and it's 8 acres right in the heart of that community.
Binghamton is a older, traditional working class neighborhood in the city of Memphis that's known for its diversity. It had a great deal of commercial, strong residential housing stock of working class families, and you obviously saw the decline that happened in that community with significant multifamily housing developments, and as well as some challenged single family housing units. And you saw a loss of commercial investment and so on. So Binghamton has seen a significant number of challenges, and how we act now will determine ultimately who these communities will serve, how they will operate, and what they will look like for the next generation.
We like to visually represent the kind of blight turned hope projects that are time and time again at the BDC. So this is kind of a really blighted, dilapidated apartment complex that then became kind of a more hopeful grocery anchored commercial development. This is the same thing. 2 of 20 units were occupied to then the in renovation stage, and it's now fully occupied affordable housing. When Tillman Cove shut down, it went from 116 units that were occupied, it was vibrant, and then it was like, okay, everyone's got 2 weeks to move. That's 72 families displaced in a minute. What do you do with that?
It was heart-wrenching. Residents were literally in tears. They were crying, they had nowhere to go, and their plea to the city was, do something, help us.
Paul texted me and says, like, I got this crazy idea. Like, we've been talking about Tillman Cove for years. What if the city bought it? And we just figured it out. And I was like, let's do it.
It's important that we find a way to put some investment in that allows for an affordable development to take place.
It started there. And from there, it was a conversation. It was, how can the BDC develop it? How can the city develop it? How can we? It was a conversation. And then it was, there's gonna be this issuance of an RFP, and we're gonna find a qualified team to bring in the real capacity. And we're gonna find the best team.
So the city sent out a request for proposals for Tillman Cove, and I had known the property. I had driven by it many times and had seen the condition that it was in, which was not good. And so I knew that the city was obviously looking to redevelop the property and find a partner to do that. So when the RFP was released, we immediately knew that it was something that we wanted to pursue. Over the last year, it's been Elmington and BDC working on moving towards a groundbreaking.
Projects like this take so much time and it takes so much effort, but nothing is real until people see dirt moving. We want to demonstrate to you that we are really serious about this by doing this demolition.
Hey, if everybody can start moving to your seats, we're going to get started very shortly. I love the energy in the space. Exciting times.
As good as a development project might be, if the community doesn't feel engaged and isn't involved in the process, it's not going to be successful.
3041. That's my spot. That's my house. And I had it decked out in there too. This is just buildings with memories, but the community means more than this. You know, because this could be gone, we still gonna have our memories. We're gonna have our good times over here, hanging under the big tree, and yeah, but it's best for the community. It's just better. And to be able to come through here and see something nice and pretty and new and something that the elders that are still here in the community can be proud of, and something that our kids can look at and see change, and then they'll do better. That's what it's about. In order to get better, we have to do better. And I think we're doing something over here in Binghamton, so I'm proud.
In the course of applying for the RFP, we got to know Octavius. We learned about his business and we learned about him and the integrity that he has, and we knew that we wanted to partner with him, and fortunately he felt the same way. And so Nixon General Contractors is the key part of our redevelopment team for Tillman Cove.
Brought you guys here today, Red Oaks Apartments. It's not far, maybe a couple blocks from Tillman Cove, the apartments that we're about to rebuild 20 years later. Apartment at the top left, apartment number 4, that's where I grew up. Coming back and providing other opportunities for people that grew up like me in my same background and situation. That's why this is very important to me. I still live in Binghamton today, so I never left. Binghamton's a very close-knit community. A lot of times you'll hear people say they're from Binghamton, Tennessee. Tillman Cove definitely is going to happen. The project means too much to the city, means too much to this community. The time it's taken to get it done is simply because it has to be right for the community first. It's not just your typical development where a big company comes in and builds whatever they want to build. They have to go through a community engagement process.
To me, this is the work that comes from the heart. None of these deals are simple. It's not straightforward. There's no straight path to get the deal done. It takes a team. It takes a lot of people that have vision and creativity, something deep down within to make you want to complete projects like this, to bring something that's going to benefit people for generations to come.
As a matter of fact, a lot of older friends of mine, they are talking about moving back once it's been reestablished. So I think it'll be a quality place to stay, especially if you're overseeing it.
Well, we're working with a lot of people to try to bring it to
Right.
fruition, and that's exactly what we're looking at doing here. We want people that live in this neighborhood, have grown up in this neighborhood, to be able to stay in this neighborhood.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's session on demystifying the underlying causes and tools for addressing displacement in Memphis. I believe that this conversation is all the more pertinent here in 2020. We've seen the COVID-19 pandemic have impacts across all sectors, from the economy to community development, employment, and even the environment. In Memphis, we have seen these impacts further exacerbate existing housing concerns affecting marginalized populations, including evictions, displacement, affordable housing, and predatory out-of-town investors buying up real estate. While most cities are in denial that they can adequately stem the tide of displacement, we in Memphis have the opportunity to shift that paradigm. As the program officer for Vibrant Spaces and Communities at the Hyde Family Foundation, I'm incredibly proud to support many of our partners' housing-focused anti-displacement initiatives in neighborhoods across the city. There is no singular strategy for addressing displacement, but rather multiple that are all working in tandem to keep people in their homes and in their neighborhoods. Our partner efforts include creating new and more accessible paths to home ownership by supporting United Housing's Welcome Home Memphis initiative and mobile home buyer education clinics, supporting the incubation of new models for preserving long-term housing affordability in neighborhoods via projects like the Binghamton Community Land Trust, helping to increase the supply of quality housing options and fostering more community-based developers with Region Smart's small developer boot camps and real estate diversity initiative, and ensuring that Memphis has a robust community development ecosystem with strong leadership capacity via Community Lift, Building Memphis, and the Center for Transforming Communities. Today's conversation with Dominic Molden of 1DC, Dexter Washington of the Memphis Housing Authority, and Justin Merrick of Center for Transforming Communities will center around a few key questions, including what is the difference between economic and physical displacement? Where are both types of displacement happening in Memphis neighborhoods? And how does our physical built environment interact with our neighborhood's social and cultural ties? With that, I'll pass it off to our session moderator, Justin Merrick, to lead this morning's conversation. Thank you, everyone, and take it away, Justin.
Good morning, everyone. And Dominic Dexter, looking forward to the conversation. So I think, one, we want to frame this as being able to open into conversation as well. So Justin Merrick, I'm with the communities, and we serve in the capacity of helping to organize, if you will, neighborhood equity. And so this conversation is deeply connected to the work that we do. And on a personal perspective, I always lean into the conversations that when we look at a root cause, right, and we talk about equitable development, that analysis that we know often leads to race, right, and how that plays a very vibrant role in how we can enter into conversations. With that being said, understand that there is a strident history here, and I think that's important, right, that we unpack that and framing this conversation at large. So I think what I want to do is I want to throw out a couple of keywords before we even get into introductions. Dominic, Dexter. Well, you know what? Let's start with introductions first, and then we'll go into keywords, and then we'll broaden the conversation into how we arrive where we are right now. So I'm going to pass it to from 1DC, if you don't mind giving a quick introduction of yourself.
So good morning, everyone. Great that we have a nice crowd on our hand. My name is Dominic Molden, and I'm a member of Organizing Neighborhood Equity. And I've been working with several community groups in Memphis and also meeting with government officials around the work that you all are doing. I have a long time history in community-based organizing and resource organizing, especially around equitable development, which for me is the development of people in place. Glad to be here. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you. And Brother Washington?
Good morning. Still morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dexter Washington. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Memphis Housing Authority. I started my journey with affordable housing with the Housing Authority back in 2001. And, moved through several of its divisions, from its housing choice voucher division over to its development division, which at that time was Hope 6. And, had an opportunity to work with some of the neighborhood revitalization projects that we had going on at that time. So took a brief stint from the Housing Authority and came back in this capacity. And, we're still doing the work of trying to transform the affordable housing landscape here in Memphis.
Thank you both. So I believe this will be a real rich conversation for all of us. And I want to encourage for those who are being to the chat and incorporate that as we go along. At the end, to dive into some points that are brought up. So I think demystifying gentrification. So one, can we just start, frame this? What is gentrification? And so the dictionary says the process of renovating and improving a house or district so that it conforms to middle class. And so I think that that leads into of conversations, but the root of gentrification, right, is gentry. And so I think the question becomes, and just to frame it so we actually can move into some deeper conversations, is gentrification bad or good? At the root of it, we want to say yes, that gentrification is not what we're looking for. We're looking for their displacement in our neighborhoods. want to throw out a couple of words just to see where we are, and then we can test the chat out and see, you know, where participation is. AMI. AMI stands for AMI. Okay. So no response. So I see one area median income. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Another one. Let's say a unit. Unit is a home. So the dwelling that is apartment, house, yes. All of the above, where we live, sleep, and eat. And TIF, we'll throw out one more term. And I say these because I think these are an important part, and I want to make sure that, right, as we talk about making conversations inclusive, that we make sure that we unpack into language, because sometimes these conversations, they get deep with lots of acronyms. A TIF, yes, stands for tax incremental fund. Yes, financing funding. Yes. And so a TIF, for those who don't know, is often used as a tool to be able to subsidize, right, taxes that are taken in, to be able to subsidize that to a specific geography. Funds are applied to that geography in various ways. It varies, but it's very common along the lines with development. Okay, so I think we want to enter into the first, Brother Molden, Brother Wash, and unpacking where Memphis is, right? And some of in terms of how we arrived where we are today. And Brother Washington, I'd like to for a few minutes to just kind of unpack where did this begin? So I think a lot of that is around Hope 6, right? And choice for us and the evolution, right? So that those are federally subsidized programs that allow for us to provide more resources in our community. And I appreciate, Brother Molden, hearing you talk about resource organizing. And I'm hoping we can dig into that a little bit later. So if you don't mind, Mr. Washington, dive into giving us a little bit of the history of Memphis.
Okay, absolutely.
Starting mid-1990s,
so,
perhaps, and
let's go back around 1996. The Memphis housing stock basically had an audit of its housing stock, and this was conducted by the Department of HUD. And what they came back and with some of their determinations was that our housing stock was old. A lot of it was built between the mid 1930s up until the 1960s, and it had a lot of deficiencies that really made a large portion of it uninhabitable. So along comes the Hope 6 project to be able to address a lot of these deficiencies in one large effort. The first Hope 6 project was focused at Lemoyne Gardens, which later became College Park. And over the course of I guess up until 2010, so between 1996 when College Park was awarded, in 2010, MHA received 5 Hope 6 grants. And so with those 5 Hope 6 grants, we were able to revitalize 5 formerly traditional public housing sites. And a lot of them had the same characteristics, very old housing stock, a lot of deficiencies, and most of them were not 100% occupied. For example, when we did University Place, I think that was a 472 unit development with only 145 occupants. So, and basically the conditions of the actual physical structure, really prevented that development in its current condition to ever be fully fully occupied. So the model with Hope 6 was to not only bring back the public housing units, but to create mixed income communities. So again, I'll use the University Place example. Approximately, it was brought back at a third. So about 150 public housing units, and then also it had tax credit units that provided an opportunity for people at moderate income levels, low to moderate income levels, at 60% of the AMI. To occupy the neighborhood, and then it also had market rate units. So that was the model that we used across all 5 Hope 6 developments. One of the things that the thought of Hope 6 was that this would be almost like a seed development. So you come in and you revitalize this public housing community, and then the surrounding neighborhood would see the improvements that are made and, make improvements as well. A lot of times it didn't happen like that, because, you ended up impacting, that community, but a lot of times you wouldn't get the business improvements that you were looking for, the private residential homes, you wouldn't see improvements as much. So, there was a bit of a gap. And so this leads us to our Choice Neighborhoods Initiative program, which I think saw some of the shortcomings of Hope 6 and said, okay, let's make some changes. One of the things that they did was incorporate, I guess, a multi-tier development plan. So, of course, you had your housing, and then your people part, and then the neighborhood part. So, the housing development, was similar to the Hope 6 model, where, you come in, revitalize the house, and create a mixed income community. The people part really put more focus on the social services that were connected to the grant. So, a lot more, referral services to community resources. A lot more focus on education, particularly, early childhood education. Actually, a whole plan from early childhood education to college. So, you had a lot more focus on that, and also, preparing people to in their, I guess, job skills. So, we were fortunate enough to get a JP Jobs Plus program grant, which provided education and job training to help people increase their income as they move back to this site. Also important with the JPEID program, the Jobs Plus program, it offered JPEID, so a Jobs Plus earned income disregard. So as you are ramping up, increasing your job skills, getting better paying employment opportunities, you earned a earned income disregard. So that your rent would stay at its current level, even as your pay increased, and this would happen for a period of 4 years to allow people to better save, better prepare, and plan financially. And then the last component of the CNI grant was the neighborhood component. And what was different with CNI than with our Hope 6 grant was that the city of Memphis was actually a co-applicant with us. So, this grant award was to MHA and the city of Memphis, and they have, done a great deal of neighborhood focused improvements. The CNI grant offers a homeowner repair program for homes in the area. So you can get up to $15,000 of exterior repair for your home. It offers a commercial facade program where, with a match, commercial entities can get, I believe, up to $50,000 in a grant to make improvements to their business. So, this was a more holistic approach than the previous Hope 6 program. And, already I think we're seeing a greater benefit from this development that we have in some of our previous ones. And, we're more than thankful to be the recipient of 5 Hope 6 grants. It was an incredible investment for the city of Memphis, but we are also very appreciative of the changes that happened with C&I that seem to be reaping greater results.
Thank you for that. So I want to do a quick frame of that so that we can then kind of open up this conversation. What I heard from in the Memphis context is that we essentially had from subsidized housing, and that work was able to evolve into choice, where there was more whole, right, around job development that was more people-centered, that allowed referral service. One specific example that I wrote down was that the rent stayed a 4-period-year time as they would increase, right, from the jobs that were provided. That would allow for conversations, I guess, around savings and what it looks like to do some wealth building. So that sounds great. And so I think the conversation where it leads to is, okay, hey, what worked about that? And before we get into that conversation, what I want to do is open the floor. What we have here today, everybody, Brother Molden comes from 1DC in DC, which I have to say that's my my home city. One of the things that has driven me on a personal level towards to stay and help to dig in to do work here in Memphis is that Memphis has a real opportunity. When we talk about demystifying displacement, I want to make sure that we're all to add questions and chat in here, but there's a real opportunity for Memphis. Often is plagued with a narrative that we are behind. And so in this case, DC, which was formerly like, Chocolate City, it went through a serious shift of gentrification, and Brother Molden was centered in that work. And so I think there's a lot of best practices that ultimately, so that we can say that there are less losers to this project. Open and frame a little bit of some of the work that you and where there may have been some parallels with what Brother Washington just offered in regards to, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
I want to start off comments by going back to the G word, or gentrification, because I think it's important to understand the roots of that word, and the sociologists that did the research to discover this phenomenon that became global. So in London, there was a sociologist named Ruth Glass who noticed that not just the gentry, but what is called the landed gentry were moving from the countryside into the city. And when they used that resource of land, which is power, they had the ability to displace or forcefully remove people in communities that were already in place. And in a lot of cases, they were already stable. So that's why when we theorize about community development and healthy communities at 1DC, we say that gentrification is a crime. And what we mean by that, it's a crime against community, and it's a form of violence that tears up histories and cultures. So you should put that into consideration. And so what we've seen in DC is what the social psychiatrist Mindy Fullylove, who visited Memphis several years ago, she has a theory of trauma that's called root shock. So if you leave this conversation with anything today, I want you to understand the concept of root shock. So what root shock is a theory that when people are in their communities and their homes are torn down, or there's a mortgage scam and their homes are taken, they experience physical psychological and emotional trauma. And so that's why in cities like Chicago, Baltimore, where my family lives, and even Philadelphia, you can tear down all the public housing you want and think that you're going to solve issues. But in fact, Hope 6 probably created more social issues because they didn't deal with the fact that people were taking their traumas to other communities, and some people were taking their trauma to several communities because they experienced serial displacement. And so now we have the story of DC. The District of Columbia was the first city in the United States to be a predominantly Black major city. 5 years ago, DC was removed from the concept of Chocolate City because DC is no longer a majority Black city. So how does that happen? The lessons to learn are some that the housing director, Paul Young, mentioned earlier. You can't give your public funds to the big developers. Your public funds need to be used for the community. And you can't feed displacement. What do I mean by that? So displacement is not a mystery. Displacement is planned, it's orchestrated, and then it's implemented. So case in point, in the 1980s in Washington, D.C., there's a neighborhood called Mount Pleasant. You could buy a house there for about $20,000 to $30,000. And in the city plan, a Green Line Metro in Mount Pleasant, in Columbia Heights, and Shaw, where One DC is located. All three of those neighborhoods experienced tremendous root shock. And so today in Mount Pleasant, because of the planning, the orchestration of overdevelopment, and the implementation of increasing market values, you can buy a house in Mount Pleasant for $1.1 million. That's right, you heard me. In 2020, a house in Mount Pleasant cost $1.1 million. When I first rented in DC in the 1980s, I lived in a 1-bedroom and I paid $300 a month. In some parts of DC right now, a small 700 square foot 1-bedroom costs $3,000 a month. A small 2-bedroom, 1,100 square feet costs $5,000 a month. Why am I giving you these stats? Is because Memphis is in a very unique position. Memphis is in a position where no one needs to be displaced because you have the instruments of the government. You have the organizing of the community organizations where you can build healthy communities where two things don't happen. Number one, the physical displacement and destruction of housing no longer takes place. And then number two, with an economic plan, you can rebuild from the economic displacement of losing Firestone, which was 7,000 jobs in 2018. So these are the strategies that you all need to think about, because the holistic process is that physical health goes with community health. And I'll stop right there. Thank you, Justin.
Okay, so my internet went out for a let me recap of what you said. So one, I'm hearing the difference or distinction between physical gentrification and psychological gentrification. I am hearing shock, right? And how trauma can be carried from neighborhood to neighborhood to neighborhood, which means that there's a larger root cause challenge that needs to be a process. I also want to lift up some of the comments that were coming through we had a comment where someone said they feel like you could see some of that root shock in the Binghamton neighborhood, a video that was shown earlier on. So I'm not sure if you touched upon this part. So in our previous conversation, we talked about how this connects back to community health and public health at large, and the use of social health determinants. So that this is like really rich, because this starts to dive into race, power, privilege, how all of that is connected to this process. Can you give us a little bit more insight, Dominic, on how that work connects back to social health determinants specifically?
So one of the things I want to reiterate again,
and maybe even
right,
touch
yes.
upon what social health determinants are.
Right.
I'm not sure
So
if I okay.
I said in my introduction that at 1DC we define equitable development as the development of people and place. And you notice how we put people before place. So one of the reasons why we do that is in understanding the reality of root shock. One of the issues that we're dealing with is that once trauma hits your community, the social determinant, which relates to the air that you're breathing, right? The high cases of asthma because of pollution in your community, because of the stress of displacement, you have high levels of high blood pressure and diabetes. And the most amazing thing that you also research is the connection between displacement and public safety issues, right? So all these life determinant issues are what we're trying to address. And what I'm saying is, because Memphis is in a position to address these with public resources and with community resources, here's what can happen. So the health issues that I just described for you can be addressed not with just eating healthy food, right? So part of the solution is what I talked about with Paul Young, is smart ideas. So the first thing you could do to make your community healthier is to have a policy about the right to stay, right? So organize for people to stay, because the longer you stay in your neighborhood, even if there are issues, the healthier you will be. At the same time, you organizing around a policy to stay, we should be looking at public health directly by creating wellness centers and art centers. So there's two places that I've been outside of the country. One was in Nicaragua and the other was in Cuba. And I'm gonna use the Cuba example. In Cuba, the community leaders decided that they would feel better if all the vacant space they had, all the abandoned buildings, they would go to Justin and the community, or Miss Morris in the community, or whomever, and say, what do you want to build in your community? So they created art parks in the vacant buildings. They did what is called trompe l'oeil art. So when they woke up in the morning, people had a different sense of themselves, right? They had a sense of pride, because they feel like we control our story and we control our land. And another component of what I'm talking about, it has to do with eating well, which is there's space for urban gardens and also for herbal gardens. And then a big piece is skill development centers, because work, play, and where you live all go together to make a holistic community and a healthy community. And some of the exciting work that is going on in Memphis, which you need to keep moving, is the control of land with the community land trust concept and cooperative housing, which creates long-term stability in your neighborhood. And also it provides for healthy human growth to deal with economic and physical displacement.
All right, so that was a lot. I heard let's dive into, well, let me reframe. I heard centers, I heard skill development, cultural spaces, the word land trust. And in the chat, I see pilots, a conversation around, and like that would take us the pilots. Over here, George Mao needs comments. People experiencing some of that now in the north. All that Dr. Atwater not going. And so what I want to lean into, Brother Washington, and kind of open up this space is like, what do you think are some of the spaces and improve? And so we've talked about some of the wins, right? We've talked about, and logistic services are and then that conversation leads us into the social health determinants, connecting it to public health. Dominic did. What do you see as either opportunity projects?
You know, I think one of our best areas where we were able to make improvements was on making a connection to relocated residents. You know, I think that largely, particularly with the Hope 6 relocations, relocation, you know, kind of tended to be a beginning and end type process. So you're ready to start the project, you relocate, you know, everyone out, you know, whether that's via a Hope 6 voucher, not a Hope 6 voucher, I'm sorry, a HCB voucher, or via, you know, placement in another public housing unit. And then, you know, when the units are ready to move back into in the revitalized community, then you bring them back. Well, one of the issues that we had was that, you know, through that gap in time, we lost a lot of connectivity with the relocated residents. So for choice neighborhoods, you know, we learned from our mistakes. You know, we have created more of a wraparound model to staying connected to relocated residents. So, you know, it's not just our community service partners, it's also, you know, various divisions within the housing authority, our asset management team, you know, our housing team, you know, our social service folks, you know, the property management team at the Revitalize Agency. Everybody, you know, meets to, you know, share in the effort to stay connected to residents. You know, if a resident has, you know, any issue that comes up, you know, there are enough people on this team that we are able to identify it, address it as a group, and, you know, make sure this person stays connected to long enough to, if they choose to come back, you know, to make that choice. And that's the other thing, you know, I look at our relocation numbers for residents that were former tenants in the sites. And on average, for most of the Hope 6s, the return rates range from about 16 or 18% to, you know, probably a high, maybe like 20, 22%. And again, what happened was that we lost a lot of people, lost connection with a lot of people in the time that the revitalization was taking place. Because we've improved our connectivity with relocated residents, you know, now our phase one, South City phase one, of the 55 units that were available for public housing residents were actually project-based voucher units. You know, we had 36 people return. You know, that's over a 60% return rate for that phase. You know, we're just beginning leasing for phase two. And of the, I want to say 63 or so units that are available for phase two, 15 have already returned. And you know, we're just in the beginning stages of the lease up process. So, you know, our you know, larger commitment to, you know, make relocation a project loan process rather than something that, you know, you do at the beginning and the end has been very beneficial to this effort.
Thank you. And so what I hear is is a space where we are helping to make the physical relocation, right? And making sure that people are able to physically relocate. And I also hear that there's another conversation that Dominic is bringing into this picture as well, as to how we can start looking at some of the deeper root causes. And so this summit to me is an opportunity to kind of open up into some of these conversations. I see that the chats are live. So I have from Candace Tate, Orange Mound needs a with Orange Mound, Shelby County tax assessor in the community, okay? And from Dominique, educating and empowering more people look like the communities of color most suffering that can control the development, make sure there is more revival building than displacement, focusing on the built environment, which helps everything from education to healthcare. So very holistic. And so what I hear in the model from the choice is that, right, as we start to look at some of the specific job development and around the physical displacement, how do we also make sure that we are addressing a more holistic, as Dominic is bringing into the picture? So one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we lifted, because I think this is a new tool and CTC has been diving into this, and I'm not sure if there's an example, Dominic, that you have from the DC market, but this concept around trust funds, but land trusts as well. And what experience, because we are looking at creating, so let me frame it. We are looking at creating a citywide land trust here in Memphis. A lot of been rooted in our Binghamton community. And so what they shared on the front end, right, the Tillman Cove and some of the displays happen on the other side of Binghamton, they have started the Binghamton Community Land Trust, where they have been able to bring in consultants and to start looking at the technical capacities. And now we're looking at cultural programmings that can wrap around it. Can you speak a little bit about your experience with Land Trust and how it may address some more of these holistic conversations that are kind of surfacing?
That was raised in the chat, and that is the increase in the police budget at Memphis. So one of the things that's a challenge in a lot of urban locations, like DC's housing budget is $150 million. The DC Metropolitan Police Department's budget is $600 million. The Housing Trust Fund in Baltimore is about $20 million. The Baltimore Police Department budget is $700 million. So the person that raised that question in the chat is on point. I didn't mention that, but that doesn't mean that I don't think, and we don't think that that's a critical issue. But the issue needs to be framed differently too, because the real public safety issue is a public health issue. Most of the violence that takes place in our community is because people aren't well, or they aren't getting the mental health or the health care treatment that they need to deal with their issues. So we should continue to talk about that. So land trust. In Washington, D.C., in the mid-90s, a group of people, starting with churches, community groups, civic organizations, small businesses, and individual homeowners and some tenant leaders, created what is called the New Columbia Community Land Trust. So it's the oldest land trust in Washington, D.C., and I've done several tenant purchases with the New Columbia Community Land Trust, which means that, like people said, we train residents to build their leadership skills and their community power to control the land in the community. So in Washington, D.C., the New Columbia Community Land Trust controls about 15 to 20 properties. And then another good model to look at is the Boston Land Trust, which is called the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative. And Dudley Street is important because in U.S. community organizing history, it's still the only organization to use eminent domain to protect its community history and culture. So that's the Dudley Street Community Organization. It would be good if Memphis could use that in a critical situation for the benefit of preserving Orange Mound or Binghamton or Klondike or Smoky City. Thank you.
Yes. So can you talk a little bit more about the eminent domain? So our understanding of eminent domain, right, in the Binghamton context would be Sam Cooper Boulevard, and how Sam Cooper Boulevard came through the Binghamton neighborhood, right? Split the neighborhood, which was a bustling neighborhood, and then it was stopped, right, by Overton Park. And that was really where there was a rich white wealthy community that was able to stop it. And I believe it may be the only one in the context of America where they were able to stop it. And so eminent domain was used to as a part of that process. Speak more about the familiar with that in Boston and how they were able to use that to do cultural preservation. And I understand it may be one of the first land trusts, and I understand that it may be one of the most. And so I connect that to Binghamton currently per capita is the most diverse neighborhood in all of, not Memphis, but the state of Tennessee.
So
talk to us a little bit about that.
Domain works in most governments, local or state, is traditionally, it's only the local government or the state that has the power of what they call in law school a taking, right? And I'm not a lawyer, but I actually used to go to Georgetown Law School to talk about this because I had so much experience dealing with community control of land, right? And so normally, if we're the government, we can go take a highway, take a farm for a good public use or what they call a public benefit. So when Dudley Street, like Justin said, was organizing with working class Latinx folks, people from Cape Verdean Islands, West Indians, African Americans, and working class Europeans, their scope of the land trust was so large that there was public land that they wanted to take control over. And they built enough power to convince the government to give them eminent domain rights to seize the properties. And it was a critical point because similar to Baltimore and Memphis, some of these lots were used for outsiders dumping trash. You know, like you see these lots, and a lot of times people think the people in the neighborhood are dumping trash, but actually it's people outside of the neighborhood dumping trash. So that was one of the arguments that the Dudley Street community used in Roxbury to convince the government that they should control the land, because once they took control of the land, even though they couldn't build low-cost affordable housing on it for a couple of years, they took care of the land, right? They grew urban gardens, they made playgrounds, and so the government approved their use of eminent domain.
So I know we only have a few minutes left, and this has been a very rich conversation. And I want to lift up some themes and maybe allow for question if anybody has questions. A question, and then for Brother Washington and Molden to share their final thoughts. But I'm hearing this conversation, right? That as we these conversations around root shock and trauma, that we have to start addressing not only the physical, right, in terms of connections, but the psychological that comes along with that. And in a city that, like Memphis, that is over 70 color, how do we integrate, you said smart ideas, Brother Mo, how do we start to integrate things that address the psychological, the trauma, wellness centers, art centers, and then how do we make sure that those are used as nacho boats or stepping stones to creating power? I am inspired leaving this session because, again, Memphis is in a very special space where we can start to realize that. And to repeat some of the comments that are lifting up right around wellness and safety. Looking at some of these last comments to see if there are any other questions. Memphis Police, it's Expressway to Nowhere. Baltimore Horrible Root. Yep. So if you will, leave us with a final thought on demystifying displacement.
So, well, I'll start. So for the work that we do at the Housing Authority, you know, I think that a lot of the mystery around it, you know, involves conversation and communication. You know, we've done a better job on, you know, increasing our communication with residents, and that is from, you know, the very beginning. You know, this is the plan that we have for your neighborhood. You know, this is the options that you have within this plan. You know, we need your feedback. We need to know, you know, what makes this revitalized community a better community for you to return to. You know, what options do you need, you know, during your relocation period? And, you know, we have to make sure that we follow through and provide the things that we say. You know, the other part of the communication is also, you know, just telling a better story about numbers. You know, our numbers now are looking great for return, but in the past, you know, they haven't looked so well. But a lot of that, you know, was around choice. You know, so, you know, you have a group of residents that move out, and whether that's into a new apartment community or to a single family home, you know, with a Section 8 voucher, you know, there's a period of time between, you know, the time that you're relocated and the time that the community is available to come back. And during that time, you may have established, you know, roots in a new place. You may prefer a single family home over, you know, community living, apartment living. So, you know, sometimes residents just chose to stay where they are. You know, their kids have developed, you know, roots in the school system in that community, or, you know, their job is closer, you know, like that. But we I think in past times failed to tell that story effectively, you know, about the choice of the residents to, you know, to return or not. So, you know, as we continue to move forward with our development efforts, you know, really the key thing is staying engaged with residents, you know, helping them to resolve, you know, any barriers that may, you know, come up during this period. And of course, providing an opportunity, you know, for them to come back, because, you know, our replacement is one-to-one in the choice neighborhoods development. So, you know, everybody that was relocated has a home to come back to if they so choose.
So I hear communication. I hear telling the stories and making sure that we are opening those spaces for that to happen. And Brother Molden, will you share some last minute words of wisdom? And we hope to continue to pull you into the Memphis market, because the conversation around culture and power is extraordinary, and Memphis, right, has that as an asset. It has extraordinary talent, and so leave us with some final words.
First thing I would say, don't do the DC thing and get to the root causes. Remember that gentrification is a crime. It does serious harm to human beings and human populations and the human communities. Displacement is not a mystery. It's planned, it's orchestrated and implemented, but fear not, because if Memphis developed a policy of your right to stay in Memphis and your right to return if you get displaced, then the healing and wellness can continue in the community to make all the city of Memphis a healthy and happy community. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone, our session, wellness, holistic session of conversations around power, privilege, race, and we want to continue these conversations. So I will make sure that we send out more information from CTC's perspective and helping to lift up these conversations. This has been very rich. Brother Watch, Brother Molden, thank you very much. Look forward to more conversations throughout the day.
Thank you. Thank you all.